There is a kind of silence that lives inside hospitals. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that comes with healing, but the heavy, pressed down kind, like breath held too long, like prayers that never make it out of someone's chest. On the third floor of Hospital Santa Esperanza in downtown Bogota, that silence lived in Ward 3C. It wrapped itself around the rusted wheelchairs and broken call buttons, around the men and women who had been admitted not because someone believed they would get better, but because there was nowhere else to put them. Old, dying, alone, the discarded, the voiceless. And walking among them, heels clacking against the cracked linoleum floor, was Camila Serrano, 25, pretty in a way that made patients smile too long, and supervisors look the other way. Cherry gloss lips, hair that curled just right at the ends, but her beauty ended at the skin, because behind the gloves and under the mask, Camila had learned something. The quieter they were, the more she could get away with. She called them vegetales, vegetables, not patients, not people. And when she was alone with them, she showed no kindness. Camila's shift started at 6:30 sharp, but she always arrived late, not because she overslept, but because they wouldn't complain. She could skip the morning sponge baths. She could forget the painkillers. She could roll her eyes when a feeding tube slipped out and mutter, "Oops, guess you didn't want to eat that bad." No one protested. Not Mr. Manuel, who'd been paralyzed from the neck down since the bus crash in Suba. Not Doña Lydia, who hadn't spoken a word since her stroke 3 months ago. And certainly not Raúl, whose lungs rattled with every breath like a broken accordion. Camila had learned early that the patients in 3C weren't a threat. They had no family, no voice, no proof. So she smiled at the doctors, gave them flirtatious glances in the break room, and returned to her silent kingdom, where suffering was background noise, where cruelty became routine. Some days it was verbal, other days it was physical. A slap to the cheek when someone soiled the sheets, a pinch to the arm when a patient moaned too loudly.
Or a whisper in the ear, "You're lucky we even keep you alive."
And yet, one pair of eyes was watching. His name was Julián Rojas, barely 20, a nursing student from Universidad Nacional. He was quiet, observant, always scribbling notes. People thought he was shy, harmless, but Julián had seen what others ignored, and he had one thing Camila never noticed: a cracked phone with a working microphone. At first, it was just curiosity. He'd heard rumors from the cleaning staff. They said Camila laughed when patients cried, that she once left a man overnight without water. So one day, Julián left his phone recording while pretending to sanitize the room. He slipped it under Mr. Manuel's bed, and then he walked away. What came back was a voice, Camila's voice, cold and unmistakable.
"You stink? Again? Disgusting. If I were your daughter, I'd let you rot too. Let's just skip your meds today. It's not like you're going anywhere."
Slap. Laughter. Julián listened to the audio with shaking hands. He could barely breathe. He had wanted to be a nurse to help, to heal. But now he held proof of something sick, festering in the heart of the hospital. He didn't know what to do. He was just a student, and she was protected, liked, beautiful, until one mistake changed everything. The slap came next, open palm sharp across the side of his face. His eyes didn't blink. They never did. But something else shifted, because for the first time, someone else was in the room. She hadn't noticed the woman standing by the curtain, a quiet visitor in a pale blue cardigan, holding a paper bag of snacks and a folded prayer book. Her name was Leticia Muñoz. She was Manuel's niece. She only visited once every 2 weeks, but this time she had arrived early, and she had seen everything. Her scream was small, strangled. Camila turned, startled. Their eyes met. There was no lie strong enough to cover it, no smile wide enough to erase the sound of that slap. Leticia didn't say a word. She simply walked out of the room and straight to the main office. That afternoon, Julián submitted his recording. The administration could no longer pretend. 3 days later, a private hearing was held. Not in a courtroom, not in a news studio, but in a back room of Hospital Santa Esperanza, a beige, windowless space that smelled faintly of formaldehyde and cowardice. 5 people sat at the table: the chief of staff, a hospital ethics officer, 2 representatives from the nursing board, and the head of human resources. Camila stood before them, hair curled, nails polished. She wore white, as if purity could be faked. They asked her questions. She denied everything, until they played the audio. The slap, the insults, the laughter, the line that ended it all. "You're lucky we even keep you alive." Camila froze. There were no more excuses, and no more places to hide.
Most thought she'd be fired. Some expected a quiet resignation letter slipped under the door. Others imagined she'd disappear, and the hospital would move on. Another bad chapter closed, another silence swept under institutional rugs. But this time, something broke the pattern. The head of the ethics board, Dr. Salazar, was old school. Gray hair, wrinkled eyes, but his voice, when he spoke, had the weight of decades. If she had stolen medicine, we could replace it. If she had harmed a healthy man, he could speak up. But what do we do when someone uses power against those who cannot speak? They didn't just want her gone. They wanted her marked. The punishment wasn't written in any handbook. It wasn't filed under HR protocol. But the board voted, unanimously. Camila Serrano would be suspended indefinitely. Her nursing license would be revoked for 5 years. And before she left the hospital, she would be shaved, in the same wing where she wore her mask of kindness, in front of staff, patients, and cameras. They called it a symbolic act of cleansing, but really, it was something else, a reckoning. The hallway had never been this quiet, not even during night shifts, not even during death. Staff lined both walls of Ward 3C, doctors, nurses, orderlies, students. Some watched with grim satisfaction, others looked away. But the chair, that folding metal chair in the middle of the hallway, remained still. Camila Serrano sat in it like a criminal awaiting sentence. Her hands were cuffed only by fear. Her white uniform was perfectly pressed, but her body trembled. The nurse holding the clipper stepped forward, an older woman from oncology, kind eyes, no judgment.
Please.
The first word came like a broken whisper. Camila looked up, her face no longer proud, but twisted with panic.
Please, no. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was tired. I didn't think they'd even notice. Please, I'm so sorry. I'll change. I'll volunteer. I'll clean the ward myself. Just don't do this.
No one moved. A single nod from Dr. Salazar, and the clippers came to life.
No, please.
She reached up to cover her hair, but the nurse gently took her hands, lowered them to her lap. Buzz. The first swipe cleaved a thick lock from her crown. It tumbled into her lap like a dying branch. Camila's breath hitched.
Please stop. I'll do anything. Anything. I didn't mean it like that.
Another pass. Another lock. Tears now streaked her cheeks, dragging mascara like bruises under her eyes. She began to sob, not silently, not delicately. She wept like a child, loud, shaking, desperate, as her hair fell faster than she could plead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manuel. I didn't mean it. I didn't know they were listening. I didn't know.
But he said nothing. Of course he didn't. He never could. And that silence, that eternal, helpless silence, was louder than any scream she made that day. By the time it ended, her shoulders had collapsed. Her lap was covered in the shorn remains of power, vanity, and pretense. Camila Serrano, no longer the girl who smiled through cruelty, sat bald, broken, and exposed under the white hospital lights. They didn't escort her out. There were no guards, no police, just the sound of clippers winding down and her shallow, uneven breath. Camila rose from the chair slowly, as if the air had thickened. Hair clung to her shoes, her sleeves, her trembling fingers. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. They simply stepped aside as she walked through the corridor, bare scalp glistening under the fluorescent lights, her face wet and raw, her eyes emptied of whatever pride had once lived there. She passed nurses who used to admire her lip color. She passed doctors she'd flirted with in elevators. She passed beds where she once whispered insults no one could answer. Now those eyes followed her, even the eyes that didn't blink, even the lips that couldn't speak. They watched her go, not out of revenge, but as witnesses to a moment that didn't feel like justice. It felt like ritual, like reckoning. Outside, Bogota's sun hit her scalp like judgment. She winced and pulled her white coat over her head. But there was no hiding anymore.